All right, everyone, welcome back from Thanksgiving. This is our second lesson in 3.1, so we're graphing lines in the coordinate plane. So let's see, just maybe a little bit of review. So remember that the vertical axis is the y-axis, and the horizontal axis is the x-axis, right? So we're going to talk about a couple things today. We're going to talk about the x-intercept and the y-intercept, among other things. But so the x-intercept is where a line or where a graph crosses the x-axis, right? So anywhere along the x-axis, what stays the same? What remains constant? And if you said, or if you're thinking, the y value, right? Because anywhere along a horizontal line, the y value stays the same. Because here at this point, y is equal to 0, right? Y equals 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2, etc., right? So at anywhere along the x-axis, y is equal to 0, right? In fact, that's the equation of the x-axis. The horizontal line is y equals 0, okay? So that's one thing we know about the x-axis is y always equals 0. What about the y-axis? Along the y-axis, what remains the same? And if you said x equals 0, you're exactly right, right? Anywhere along the y-axis, x equals 0. 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2, etc., right? And so anywhere along the y-axis, x equals 0. Okay? So if I want to find the y-axis, or excuse me, the y-intercept, I can just set x equal to 0, and I can figure out what is y equal for that particular equation. And I can do a similar thing for if I'm trying to find the x-intercept. I can set y equal to 0 and solve for x. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And this will make more sense when we see some examples. So graphing lines using the intercepts. So the x-intercept is a point at which the line crosses the x-axis. To find the x-intercept, substitute 0 for y, just like we said, right? Y equals 0. Okay, so we substitute 0 for y, and then we figure out what x is. Okay, so this will be our what we solve for. Okay, so anything comma 0, any point that has a comma 0 is going to be on the x-axis, right? And the same thing if we're looking for the y-intercept, that's the point that crosses the y-axis, and we want to substitute 0 for x, right? So that's where x equals 0. Okay, so our coordinate will be 0 comma something, right? And so anytime you have 0 comma something, that's on the y-axis. All right, now here's a question. What do you think 0 comma 0, where do you think that would be? That's right, on the origin. All right. All right, so here's an example where we're actually using the intercepts to graph a line, okay? So it says for each equation, state the x-intercept and the y-intercept, then graph the equation using the intercepts and a third point. Okay, so we're gonna find let's start with the y-intercept. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set x equal to 0 to find the y-intercept, okay? Because remember the y-axis is where x equals 0. All right, and so if I plug 0 in for x, so I would get 2 times 0 plus y equals 6. So basically what is going to happen is 2 times 0 is 0, and so all we get is y equals 6. Okay, so 0, 6. So 0, remember this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. So 0, comma 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be right there. All right, so that's the y-intercept. Okay, now next let's find the x-intercept. So the x-intercept is where y equals 0, right? So now we're going to plug 0 in for y. So we're going to do 2x plus 0 equals 6, right? And do a little algebra here. So 2x equals 6 if the y goes away, right? And then we divide by 2, and we get x equals 3. Okay, so when y equals 0, x equals 3. So 3 comma 0, if I count that out, first of all, if y equals 0, that's along the x-axis, right? So I'm going to go 3 on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 0 on the y, so that's going to stay right there. Okay, actually let me put that in a different color just so you can differentiate here. Okay, so the x-intercept is in green. So now it says graph one more point. We really don't need one more point, right, to graph. We just need 2 points. So we already have enough. But just for good measure, we'll find a third point and to follow directions, right? So let's see, now we can pick anything. Let's pick a value for x. Good thing to plug in is 1 since we've already tried zeros. So I'm going to plug in 1 for x. I'm going to do 2 times 1 plus y equals 6. So I'll get 2 plus y equals 6. Subtract 2 from both sides. And we get y equals 4. So 1 comma 4 is going to be my next point. So 1 on the x-axis, right? And 4 on the y. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, there we go. So now we can graph our line. So hopefully you have a straight edge, so you can go a little more accurate than me. It looks something like that. Okay. All right, so that's how it's done. All right, here's another one doing the same thing. So let's start with the y-intercept. So I'm going to set x equal to 0. So when I set x equal to 0, what's going to happen is this will go away, right? So the y-intercept, if it's y equals mx plus b form, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, then the constant is what we'll get, right? Because it's just going to be y equals 0 plus 5. And so that's just going to turn into y equals 5. Okay, so the y-intercept is going to be at 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so now for the x-intercept, we're going to set y equal to 0. And so it'll be 0 equals negative 1/2 x plus 5, right? And so we can do a few different, or go a few different ways here, but I'm going to add 1/2 x to both sides. You could also multiply everything by 2, right, to get rid of the fractions. And so I'll get 1/2 x equals 5. And I'm going to multiply everything by 2 to cancel out the 1/2, or I can multiply by 2 over 1, right? But it's the same as 2. So then I get x equals 10. Okay. All right, so 10 comma 0 is my x-intercept. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the x-axis. Okay, so now I have everything I need. As long as I have 2 points, I can graph it, right? Just connect the dots. But I'm going to find a third point for good measure. So I could pick 1, but if I multiply 1 times negative 1/2, I'm going to get a fraction, which isn't a big deal. But if I multiply by an even number, I'll get a whole number. So I'm just going to multiply by 2. So it's going to be y, or I'm going to plug in 2 for x. So y equals negative 1/2 times 2 plus 5. So negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1, right? 2 times 1/2 is a whole. And then a negative times a positive is negative. So we get negative 1 plus 5. So y equals positive 4. So 2 comma 4, right? So it's going to be 1, 2 on the x, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the y. So it'll be right there. Okay, so So now we just connect the dots. All right, so there's our line. All right, one more of these graphing ones. So same thing, find the x and the y-intercept. So here I have an equation with a couple of fractions in them. So I'm gonna multiply everything by the common denominator here, which is 6, just to get rid of the fractions. I didn't do it in the last one, but I'll do it on this one for one reason, because there's 2 fractions, and just to show you, just remind you how to do that if we need to. So when I multiply everything by 6, what I'm actually going to do is just write a 6 in there by each term. Okay, just so I can individually cancel. So what's going to happen with this first 6 times a third, the 6 and the 3 will reduce to 2 over 1, right? So it'll be 2 times 1x, which is 2x. All right, and then we have negative a half times 6. So what will happen is the 6 and a half reduced to 3 over 1, so it'll be negative 1y times 3, which is negative 3y. And then 3 times 6 here, that's going to be 18. All right, so now we're set to go. So for the y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for x, so it's going to be 2 times 0 minus 3y equals 18. So of course this goes away, and then we can divide both sides by negative 3, and so we get y equals negative 6. All right, so when x equals 0, y equals negative 6, so we can plot that. X equals 0 here, and y equals negative 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's our point. So now for the x-intercept. So do it on this side over here. So now I'm going to set y equal to 0, so it's going to be 2x minus 3 times 0 equals 18. 3 times 0 cancels out, so basically I'm just going to divide both sides by 2, and so I'll get x equals 9. Okay, so the x-intercept where y equals 0, x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, and now for the kicker, one more point. I'll just, let's see, we've been plugging in 1. Yeah, I'll just plug in 1 again. So it's just going to be 2 times 1 minus 3, y equals 18. 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to get 2 minus 3y equals 18. Subtract 2 from both sides. Negative 3y equals 16. We'll divide by negative 3. So we get y equals negative 16 thirds, right? Can't simplify that. We could reduce it, or convert it to a mixed number, so it'd be 5 and a third, right? Negative 5 and a third. So when x equals 1, y equals negative 16 thirds, right? So when x equals 1, y equals negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a third. So something right there, right? Okay. All right. So if you're graphing fractions, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because we don't have our grid set up for fractions. So, just do the best you can. Oops. Speaking of the best I can, I think I can do better than that. All right. So there's our line.